Your Excellency, honored guests, may I now request that we all rise for the conveyance and ceremonial installation of the copy number 1 of the Constitution of Kenya and the other national emblems of the Republic. Kenya Defence Forces, you may proceed.
Mheshimiwa Rais, katiba hii ya Kenya ilipitishwa mwaka 2010 tarehe 4 Agosti na kuanza kutumika rasmi tarehe 27 Agosti mwaka 2010. Mwanasheria mkuu Mheshimiwa Dorcas Oduor, Senior Counsel, akituletea nakala ya kwanza ya katiba hii hivi sasa. Na katiba hii Mheshimiwa Rais ikiwa imeweka misingi ifuatayo: ukuu wa wananchi, ikipeana mamlaka kwa wananchi wenyewe ili waweze kujitawala; haki na uhuru wa msingi, haki ya kuishi kwa usawa, uhuru na kujieleza; elimu, afya na utu. Mheshimiwa Rais, katiba hii imeweza pia kuweka mgawanyo wa mamlaka, ikiwemo ile ya executive, mamlaka ya utendaji, bunge inayotunga sheria, na hali kadhalika mahakama ambapo tunakimbilia wakati wa kupata haki. Miongoni mwa sheria ambazo ziko ndani ya katiba hii, Mheshimiwa mwanasheria mkuu hivi sasa akiweza kuandaa katiba hii na kuiweka mahali panapostahiki. Katiba ya Kenya ikiwa ndiyo sheria kuu, ikiwa na sura 18. Mheshimiwa Rais, takayofuata hivi sasa ni bendera rasmi ya taifa la Kenya. Bendera ni ishara ya utaifa, umoja, uhuru na utambulisho wa Kenya. Bendera ya Kenya ina rangi 4 pamoja na alama ya ngao utakavyoshuhudia Mheshimiwa Rais, na mikuki katikati yake. Watakapoweza kuandaa bendera hii, nitaweza kukujuza rangi hizi zinaashiria nini. Wakija kwa ustadi Mheshimiwa Rais, bendera ikiwa ni fahari yetu kama Wakenya, wakija kwa umaridadi kama wanajeshi kuweza kuchukua nafasi yao kuandaa bendera hii. Kwa maridadi kabisa wakiweza kufungua bendera hii Mheshimiwa Rais. The jumbo flag. Mheshimiwa Rais wakiweza kuandaa bendera hii hivi sasa, rangi nyeusi ikiashiria watu wa Kenya, rangi nyeupe Mheshimiwa Rais ikiashiria amani tulio nayo na umoja wetu kama wa Kenya, rangi nyekundu ikiashiria damu iliyomwagika wakati wa mapambano ya kuleta uhuru, rangi ya kijani ikionyesha ardhi na utajiri pamoja na mali asili ya taifa letu la Kenya, na Mheshimiwa Rais ngao na mikuki hiyo ikiashiria utayari wetu wa kulinda taifa letu la Kenya. Bendera ya Kenya. Kuweza kuondoa hivi sasa bendera hii ya kusherekea katiba miaka 16 tangu kuweza kuzinduliwa. Takayofuata Mheshimiwa Rais takuwa ni maneno ya wimbo wa taifa, ukipenda kwa lugha ya Kimombo National Anthem Lyrics. Mheshimiwa Rais, maneno ya wimbo wa taifa ya Jamhuri ya Kenya ina uzito, ikiweza kutuweka mbele zake Mwenyezi Mungu na kuomba dua Neno la kwanza, Mheshimiwa Rais, tukiweza kufahamu kwamba Mwenyezi Mungu ndiye mwenye nguvu zote na kuweka imani yetu kwake Mwenyezi Mungu aweze kuibariki na kuilinda Kenya. Pia inaweza kutueleza kwamba umoja wetu ndio nguzo yetu, tuweze kushikamana kila wakati tukiomba amani iweze kuwa katika taifa letu la Kenya, na utulivu, uhuru wa kuweza kulinda taifa letu, na hali kadhalika Kenya kuweza kustawi na maendeleo. Upendo na umoja wa taifa, uzalendo wa kujitolea kwa ajili ya Kenya. Na kwa ujumla, Mheshimiwa Rais, wimbo wa taifa unaonyesha uzalendo, umoja, amani, uhuru na matumaini ya Kenya kustawi. Maneno ya wimbo wa taifa. Shukran. Mheshimiwa Rais, takayofuata ni nembo ya taifa la Kenya. Mheshimiwa Rais, nembo ya taifa la Kenya ni alama rasmi inayoonyesha ujumbe wa umoja, ulinzi, uhuru na utambulisho wa taifa la Kenya. Kwenye nembo hii, Mheshimiwa Rais, utaweza kuona ngao. Ngao hii inaashiria ulinzi wa taifa letu la Kenya. Simba wawili, Mheshimiwa Rais, wakiashiria nguvu tulio nayo kulinda taifa letu, tukiwa na ujasiri na imara kama simba, ardhini, angani na hata kwenye fuo za bahari zetu. Mikuki miwili, Mheshimiwa Rais, unayoiona ni ya kulinda mipaka yetu na hali kadhalika taifa letu la Kenya. Jogoo inaashiria mamlaka na hali kadhalika mwanzo mpya, kama vile Mheshimiwa Rais, kila asubuhi jogoo anapowika, wasaa wa majogoo, alfajiri, wa Kenya huamka kujituma na kuanza kujenga taifa lao. Mimea unayoona, Mheshimiwa Rais, inaashiria kilimo na utajiri wa mali asili tulio nayo kama taifa la Kenya. Unavyotazama, Mheshimiwa Rais, tuna pareto, nanasi, mahindi miongoni mwa mimea tunayoipanda na mazao yanayopatikana katika taifa letu la Kenya. Neno harambee, Mheshimiwa Rais, linatukumbusha tushirikiane, tusaidiane kwa pamoja, tuwe na mshikamano mmoja kama wa Kenya. Nembo ya taifa la Kenya. Thank you. Mheshimiwa Rais, kuhitimisha tafrija hizi za kijeshi ni muhuri wa umma, the public seal, Republic of Kenya. Mgeni wetu rasmi, kwa sababu ya uzito wa muhuri huu, wanajeshi hawa wataenda kuuzindua upande ule wa pili, na utaweza kutazama, na nitawaalika sote tuweze kuelekeza macho yetu kwenye runinga zetu na hali kadhalika walioko hapa mbele kuweza kutazama wanajeshi hawa wakizindua muhuri huu wa umma, katika lugha ya Kimombo, the public seal, Republic of Kenya. Muhuri wa umma wa Kenya ni alama rasmi, Mheshimiwa Rais, inayotumika kuthibitisha nyaraka rasmi za serikali, na hali kadhalika inaashiria mamlaka ya serikali kuleta uhalali na uhalisia wa kuthibitisha kwamba hati hizi ni rasmi, na hali kadhalika kuleta ukuu wa jamhuri yetu ya Kenya. Wakienda kuzindua rasmi hivi sasa muhuri huu wa umma. Mheshimiwa Rais, wakati wa kwanza mimi kujionea rasmi muhuri huu wa umma ni wakati ulipokuwa unapandisha mji wa Eldoret kuwa jiji, na tukaweza kuona rasmi muhuri huu wa umma. Tuwapigie makofi mazuri tafadhali wanapohitimisha tafrija hizi za kijeshi. Kwa heshima tarudisha kwake Hopes aweze kuendelea. Mheshimiwa Felix Kosgei. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Your Excellency, the Constitution now installed before us opens with a preamble. This preamble is the soul upon which our constitutional order rests. In its words, the people of Kenya honor the generations whose struggle brought freedom and justice to our land, affirm the values by which we seek to live, and declare the nation we resolve to build. It is therefore befitting that these words should be voiced today by a new generation of Kenyans, the inheritors of the constitutional promise and the custodians of its future. Sir, permit me now to invite the 16 pupils selected to lead us in the recital of the preamble to the Constitution. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may we all kindly rise for the recital of the preamble to the Constitution set out on page 7 of the program. Page 7 of the program.
Good morning, Your Excellency, honorable gentlemen and women. Before you is Jamhuri High School and Pangani High School, presenting to you the recital of the preamble of the 2010 Constitution of Kenya. We, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation. Respectful of the environment, which is our heritage, and determined to sustain it for the benefit of future generations, committed to nurturing and protecting the well-being of the individual, the family, communities, and the nation. Recognizing the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. Exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance of our country, and having participated fully in the making of this constitution, having adopted, enacted, and given this constitution to ourselves and to our future generations, and having promulgated it on the 27th day of August in the year of our Lord 2010, do hereby, on this 16th anniversary of its promulgation, reaffirm our commitment to respect, uphold, and defend this constitution for the glory of Kenya. God bless Kenya.
Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Thank you. Your Excellency, the aspirations proclaimed in the preamble are marked throughout the contours of our Constitution. Among its most consequential reforms were devolution and the establishment of Constitutional Commission and independent offices. Devolution brought government resources and decision-making closer to the people. Constitutional commissions and independent offices were established to protect the sovereignty of the people, secure observance by all state organs of democratic values and principles, and promote constitutionalism. Through these institutions, the Constitution was intended to take root across the Republic and find expressions in the daily lives of Kenyans. 16 years on, this Katiba Day provides an occasion to account for how faithfully these institutions have discharged their mandates and how meaningfully their work has advanced the constitutional promise. Are our institutions protecting rights and serving citizens? Are they strengthening accountability? Are their constitutional mandates producing measurable improvements in the lives of the people? These questions lie at the heart of today's symposium. They guide this national examination of the progress made, the obligations that remain, and the work required to give full effect to the Constitution. That work calls for sustained coordination amongst the institutions established under our constitutional order. Within the organization of the national government, the office of the Deputy President is responsible for coordinating relations between the two levels of government and facilitating engagement with constitutional commissions and independent offices. It is pursuant to that mandate that His Excellency, the Deputy President, has provided leadership in convening the 2026 Katiba Day Symposium and shaping its constitutional accountability agenda. To set the context for the proceedings and frame the constitutional responsibilities that will guide our deliberations, it is now my singular honor and privilege to invite the Deputy President to address this symposium and thereafter invite His Excellency the President to make his remarks. Sir, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Deputy President.
Your Excellency, sir, I ride on all the protocols that have been established already and would like to say the following before I invite you, Your Excellency. That on a moment like this one, 5 things, at least for me, ran through my mind. The first is on the 16th anniversary of celebrating the constitution that we established for ourselves to guide the creation cited for us, but also in the foundational articles of the Constitution that form the bedrock upon which our constitutional architecture is raised. These foundational articles define Kenya as a democratic multi-party state. It defines the territory of Kenya in Article 5, where it stretches from, and the subnational units that constitute Kenya, the 47 counties, determined to live together as one sovereign, indivisible nation. Your Excellency, it is a good time for us to reflect on how far we have advanced our sovereignty and the sovereignty of the people of Kenya, how far we have kept the unity of our nation, and how far we've traveled in forging tolerance and finding strength as a nation in our diversity. The second item, or the second theme that runs through my reflection on a day like this as a citizen of Kenya, is how far again in those 16 years, Your Excellency, we have been able to perfect our vertical relationships. Looking at the Constitution, a relationship is envisaged between those who act on behalf of the state and the people. The relationship between the legislature, judiciary, and the executive at the national level, and the executive and the legislature at the county level, and also holders of constitutional commissions and independent offices. How the three arms of government and the two arms of government at the county level relate to one another, and especially relate to the citizens of Kenya, the vertical relationship. Number three is the horizontal relationship among the arms of government themselves and the levels of government, and how we have come to perfect devolution, to respect the independence of the judiciary, to respect the independence of the legislature, how far the legislature has been a check on the executive, and how far the judiciary has helped us to interpret the laws of our land. That is the third thing that runs through my mind. But there is a fourth theme that runs through my mind, Your Excellency, and this is the software of our nation. Our Constitution envisages that this nation, other than the development we do for ourselves, will be human rights, democracy, environmental sustainability, accountability, the values of the public service in Article 232, etc., etc. And I think on a day like this one, we will be listening to one another to find out what journey we have covered and where the gaps are, so that we can perfect our nation's software as we also strengthen its hardware. Finally, Your Excellency, on a day like this one, I, and perhaps a few others in this room, are curious to reflect on the 16 years that we have taken to advance the requirements of the two legs on which our country and our democracy is founded. These two legs are found in the Bill of Rights, but they are also scattered everywhere else, including the preamble. The first limb is the limb of democracy and the need to advance a nation founded on human dignity and human rights and democratic ideals. But there is a second limb, Your Excellency. And this is the limb that you invited us to begin a conversation on as we look towards a Kenya beyond 2030. And this is the limb of prosperity. I dare say, Your Excellency, before I invite you, that as you reminded us when you were launching this conversation, that the aspiration of our constitutional order is very much about democracy, but it's also very much about creating wealth for the citizens of Kenya, empowering the citizens, and realizing the aspects of the Bill of Rights that give dignity and empowerment to the citizen, creating a wealthy, healthy Kenya. Rights that have been ignored for some time now around decent housing, their right to health, the right to access the things that make life convenient and comfortable. And I dare say, Africa, Kenya, the developing world must not shy away from pursuing wealth and talking about wealth creation as much as we advance democracy. And therefore, mine, Your Excellency, is to listen to you and to the many other people that I see gathered here. I see the fathers of our Constitution present here. I see the children of our Constitution right here. And because we have a long morning ahead of us, and because also I see many people who are much more qualified on the matters of today's discussion than I am, I want to stop there and request that we be upstanding and invite His Excellency the President to set the tone for this meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Speak to the nation.
Thank you very much. Please, let's take our seats. Asante sana. Distinguished guests, fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen, on this day, 16 years ago, Kenya did not merely promulgate a new supreme law. We entered a new constitutional order and renewed the covenant upon which our republic is established. Generations of Kenyans had struggled and sacrificed for this moment. They wanted a nation governed not by the whims of the mighty and powerful, but by the sovereign will of the people. A nation in which authority would be restrained by law, public office exercised as a trust, and every institution held accountable to the citizens it serves. With that in mind, Katiba Day, 16 years later, must be more than an annual anniversary. It must be a day of national accounting. We must take a collective pause and reflect on a few critical questions. Have we faithfully implemented the Constitution? Have we exercised the authority it confers upon us responsibly? Have we effectively delivered the rights that the Constitution guarantees? And have our institutions fully honored the purposes for which they were established. These questions apply to the executive, to parliament, to the judiciary, to the national and county governments, to constitutional commissions and independent offices, and to every state and public officer. Ladies and gentlemen, our Constitution performs two equally important principles. First, it restrains power. It shares authority, establishes checks and balances, protects fundamental freedoms, and provides remedies against abuse. Second, it manages power. It commands the state to govern, protect, and provide and progressively realize the social and economic rights of the people. Our responsibility is to uphold both obligations. Power must be managed and rights must be assured. That is why Article 43 is central to any honest assessment of constitutional implementation. It guarantees every person the right to the highest attainable standards of health, accessible and adequate housing, and reasonable standards of sanitation, freedom from hunger, and adequate food of acceptable quality, clean and safe water in adequate quantities, social security, and education. It further declares that no person shall be denied emergency medical treatment and requires the state to provide appropriate social security to persons unable to support themselves and their dependents. These are not ornamental provisions placed in our Constitution. They are fundamental rights. Article 21 requires the state to take legislative, policy, and other measures, including the setting of standards, to achieve the progressive realization of what I have stated. But progressive realization does not mean indefinite postponement. It recognizes that resources are finite, but requires every government to take reasonable, deliberate, concrete, and measurable steps towards fulfilling these rights. Progress must therefore be visible in whether a mother can obtain health care, whenever and whether an emergency patient is treated before being asked for pay, whether a family has clean water, whether a child can attend school, and whether a citizen can afford a decent home, and whether a vulnerable person can live in dignity. To my mind, therefore, the ultimate test of the constitutional implementation is not how often we quote the Constitution or invoke constitutionalism. It is how closely the daily experience of the citizens reflect the promise of the Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, when this administration sought the mandate of the people in 2022, it was not merely on the basis of campaign rhetoric or political sloganeering. We placed a concrete proposal on the delivery of Article 43 at the center of our national transformation agenda. Universal health care, affordable housing, food security, education, and social protection became central pillars of our national transformation plan. The bottom-up economic transformation agenda was, from the outset, designed as an instrument for the implementation of the Constitution. That is why, over the last 4 years, we have been translating constitutional obligations into practical benefits across healthcare, housing, education, agriculture, and devolution. More than 32 million Kenyan citizens are now registered, with 8 million being treated by Social Health Authority. Over 100,000 community health promoters are servicing households, and the 922 Lifeline is strengthening access to emergency care. More than 274,000 affordable homes are under construction, creating 1.1 million jobs. We have also recruited more than 100,000 teachers and constructed 23,000 classrooms to boost education outcomes, and rolled out a new funding model for our university education. At the same time, agricultural reforms are increasing food production, reducing agricultural inputs, putting more income into farmers' pockets, and strengthening service delivery through county governments. By no means is this work complete. Significant steps remain. Nevertheless, these interventions demonstrate that the promise of our new constitution is steadily becoming the lived experience of more Kenyans today than was the case before. This same constitutional obligation must now guide the national conversation on Kenya beyond 2030. As we consider the country we want to build beyond the present development horizon, we must not begin, and we will not be beginning, from a barren place. The Constitution has already defined our destination, and that is a democratic, prosperous, equitable, and inclusive republic founded on human dignity, social justice, sustainable development, and the sovereignty of the people. The task before us is to translate that constitutional destination into a coherent national development charter. We must determine how the next generation of growth will deliver the rights guaranteed in the Constitution, how devolution will unlock the potential of every part of Kenya, how innovation, technology, and enterprise will expand opportunity, how economic progress will be reconciled with environmental stewardship, and how Kenya's choices will protect rather than mortgage the future of generations yet to come. Kenya beyond 2030 must therefore be more than a new economic blueprint or a catalogue of projects. It must be a compact between the state and the citizen, between the present and the future, and between our national ambition and our collective responsibility. Let me repeat that. Kenya beyond 2030 must therefore be more than a new economic blueprint or a catalogue of projects. It must be a compact between the state and the citizens, between the present and the future, and between our national ambition and our collective responsibility. Its success will not only be measured by the size of our economy, the height of our buildings, or the reach of our infrastructure. It will be measured by the dignity, opportunity, security, and quality of life enjoyed by every citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me and us to another consequential question of accountability in our constitutional democracy. What is the place of an electoral mandate within a constitutional order? Political parties present manifestos to the people. Citizens consider competing visions and elect a government. That mandate carries democratic legitimacy and imposes a responsibility on leaders to keep their word and deliver on their promise. The ballot gives the mandate. The Constitution establishes the boundaries. The public institutions ensure that both are respected. How much constitutional space must an elected government have to implement the program upon which it was elected? When that program is challenged, how should courts distinguish between reviewing constitutionality and making policy choices constitutionally entrusted to elected institutions? When a court finds that a policy violates the Constitution, how should the executive and parliament respond promptly and constructively? How should courts protect rights while remaining attentive to institutional roles, public resources, and practical consequences of their decisions? How do we preserve constitutional review without unnecessarily paralyzing legitimate government action? How do we ensure that checks and balances remain instruments of accountability and holding government to account rather than pathways to institutional gridlock? These questions do not constitute any attack on any institution or infringement on any institution. Judicial independence is non-negotiable. Courts must remain free to interpret the Constitution, protect rights, and invalidate unlawful action. Equally, executive, legislative, and judicial authority all derive legitimacy from the people and must be exercised in their service. Where a government acts unlawfully, it must obey the courts and correct its course. Where lawful policy choices fall within the constitutional authority of elected institutions, that democratic space must also be respected. Ladies and gentlemen, accountability also requires us to confront difficult moments in our recent national life. During the protests of 2024 and those that followed, young Kenyans and other citizens exercised their constitutional freedoms to speak, assemble, demonstrate, picket, and petition public authorities. Their message was clear. They wanted to be heard. They demanded greater accountability, better government, and a meaningful place in shaping the future of their nation. Those demands were not an assault on democracy. Peaceful protest, criticism, and dissent are essential to democracy. Yet, those protests also presented our republic with a profound constitutional question. How do we protect the citizens' right to protest while at the same time fulfilling the state's obligation to preserve constitutional order? The Constitution itself provides the starting point. Article 37 protects the right of every person peaceably and unarmed to assemble, demonstrate, picket, and present petitions to public authorities. That protection must be real. No Kenyan should lose their life, liberty, or dignity merely for criticizing government, expressing an unpopular opinion, or participating in peaceful demonstration. I recognize the pain that remains from the events of that period. Some families lost loved ones. Serious allegations were made concerning unlawful arrests, enforced disappearances, and the excessive use of lethal force. We cannot honor the Constitution by looking away from such allegations. Every credible allegation of a human rights violation must be investigated independently, thoroughly, and transparently. Where wrongdoing is established, those responsible must be held accountable in accordance with the law. At the same time, defending the rights of peaceful protesters does not require us to excuse crime committed under the cover of protest. The Constitution protects peaceful and unarmed assembly. It does not protect arson, looting, lawless. Distinguish carefully between a citizen exercising a constitutional right and an individual committing criminal offenses. We must neither criminalize protest because of the actions of a few, nor legitimize criminal conduct merely because it occurs in the course of a protest. Rights and responsibilities are not enemies. Responsibility protects the conditions in which everyone's right can be enjoyed. The right to protest carries a responsibility to remain peaceful and unarmed. The duty to maintain order carries an obligation to respect life, dignity, and the law. The authority to govern carries a responsibility to listen. The authority and the freedom to disagree carries a responsibility to preserve the democratic institutions through which disagreement can be expressed and resolved. Government belongs to the people. Parliament belongs to the people. The courts belong to the people. The institutions of the republic belongs to the people. They may be criticized, challenged, and required to account, but they must not be destroyed, because they are the instruments through which the people govern themselves. Our national task, therefore, is not to choose between liberty and order. It is to build an order founded on liberty and to exercise liberty in a manner that preserves the constitutional order. Let me repeat that. Our national task, therefore, is not to choose between liberty and order. It is to build an order founded on liberty and to exercise liberty in a manner that preserves the constitutional order. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution belongs to all of us. Its authority binds all of us. Its rights protects all of us. Its responsibilities call on all of us to account. Accountability cannot end with defending institutional territory, observing procedures, or publishing reports. Ultimately, we must account for outcomes, whether we have protected the sovereignty of the people, upheld human dignity, preserved constitutional order, used public resources responsibly, and brought the rights guaranteed by our Constitution within the reach of more citizens. 16 years ago, we gave ourselves a transformative Constitution. Our responsibility today is to fulfill its promise and build a democratic, prosperous, and transformed republic. That is the meaning of Katiba at 16. What we now say, Kenya yetu, wajibu wetu. I know there will be a robust conversation after this. I just thought of provoking us to have a conversation in this context as we celebrate our Constitution. And it is a moment for us to reflect collectively as a nation, not pointing fingers, not avoiding responsibility, not trying to excuse what is not right, but to honestly talk not at, but with each other. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Another round of applause for His Excellency as we take our seats. Thank you, Your Excellency. As mentioned by His Excellency, we are going to have a number of discussions. Our first panel discussion is going to be on the state of accountability. And I'll request that the choir, you take your position as we now set up the stage for that discussion. It is going to be discussion basically on the state of accountability by constitutional commissions and independent offices. But while we set up the stage for that particular discussion, we'll have the All Saints Cathedral Choir together with the Presidential Escort Band that will sing a song. And this particular song is I Vow to Thee, My Country, featuring a specially newly commissioned second and third verse honoring Kenya's Katiba. And if you look up, you'll see we have 16 flags that are flying up there and behind on the backstage, which is just a reminder of the 16 years of our Katiba 2010. So the choir, together with the Presidential Escort Band, are going to give us a wonderful song, I Vow to Thee, My Country, featuring a special newly commissioned second and third verse honoring Kenya's Katiba. Choir, over to you. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And before we get to the panel discussion, allow me, Your Excellency, to invite Honorable Dorcas Agei-Kodwor, the Attorney General, the state law, to make some submissions before we then have the panel discussion, which will be looking at the state of accountability. Welcome.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the Deputy President, Your Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, the Speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to introduce this important conversation on the state of accountability by constitutional commissions and independent offices. Some experts say that constitutionalism divides power among government branches, institutions, for purposes of checks and balances in a political system. As evidence of that division, Your Excellency, on behalf of the women in leadership, I wish to express our gratitude because out of the 12, Chapter 15, institutions that are the subject of today's symposium, 6 of them are led by women. And that is an example of constitutionalism. The Honorable the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court is the chair of the Judicial Service Commission. Margaret Nyakango is the controller of budget. Nancy Gadungu is the Auditor General. Honorable Jaldesa Rehema is the chair of MGEC. Clarice Oganga is the chair of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And Mary Chebukati is the chair of the Revenue Allocation. Not forgetting the Chief Registrar of the Court and myself, we found favor before God and before you, and we are grateful for having been given that opportunity to assist you in nurturing constitutionalism in this country. We have been supported by all branches of government. As we commemorate 16 years of our Constitution, we are invited to do more than celebrate the existence of the constitutional order that we created in 2010. We are called to examine whether our institutions are living up to the expectations of the Katiba and ultimately to the expectations of the Kenyan people. It is in this sense that the theme of today's symposium, Katiba at 16, Kenya yetu, wajibu wetu, tuwajibike, is particularly appropriate. Our Constitution is ours. Our institutions are ours. And the responsibility for making the Constitution work is equally ours. The great constitutional transformation of 2010 was not simply the redistribution of the institutional functions. It was the redefinition of the relationship between power and responsibility. It deliberately created institutions with distinct mandates, checks and balances, safeguards for independence and clear responsibilities to the people. In particular, constitutional commissions and independent offices occupy a very important place in that architecture. They exist to protect the sovereignty of the people, secure observance by state organs of democratic values and principles, and to promote constitutionalism. Their independence is therefore not incidental. It is fundamental. But there is an important distinction we must continue to appreciate. Our institutions are independent, but they are not isolated. Indeed, one of the enduring lessons of 16 years of constitutional implementation is that independence and interdependence must coexist. The Constitution does not contemplate institutions operating as a separate island or separate islands. It gives institutions distinct mandates, but places all of them within one constitutional operative framework, serving one sovereign, the people of Kenya. A commission may be independent in the exercise of its mandate, but the fulfillment of that mandate will often require engagement with Parliament, the executive, the judiciary, other commissions and independent officers, county governments, and citizens. The Auditor General may identify questions concerning the use of public resources. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission may confront questions of integrity and corruption. The Commission Administrative of Justice may address maladministration. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights may raise questions touching on the protection of rights and freedoms. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission has its own constitutional responsibilities within the management of public resources. In fact, sometimes Kenyans wonder that if all these things are well spelled in the Constitution, how come some institutions are still going to the judiciary to interpret their mandate? How come some independent offices and constitutional commissions still think that their powers are not properly being exercised when the Constitution has given them the power and the legislations that create them give them the operative atmosphere? These mandates are distinct, but the constitutional objectives they serve are interconnected. The challenge, therefore, is not to weaken institutional independence in the name of cooperation, neither should we use independence as a reason for institutional isolation. We must always endeavor to build a culture in which institutions are sufficiently independent to dispense and discharge their mandates fearlessly, while being sufficiently interconnected to make the constitutional system work effectively. That requires mutual respect, it requires consultation, it requires information sharing where the law permits, it requires coordination action where mandates intersect, and importantly, it requires each institution to recognize that constitutional effectiveness measures constitutional visibility. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to another important question for Katiba 16. Are our institutions as strong as the Constitution requires them to be? Institution building is not an event. It is a continuous constitutional responsibility. 16 years after promulgation, we must continue to strengthen the institutions entrusted with safeguarding our democracy. That includes strengthening their legal frameworks. It means ensuring they have the institutional capacity, professional competence, and resources necessary to discharge their mandates. It means safeguarding their independence. It also means strengthening their internal systems of governance, accountability, transparency, and performance. Strong institutions are not simply institutions that possess power. Strong institutions are institutions that exercise their power lawfully, consistently, fairly, and effectively. They must be capable of resisting improper pressure, but they must equally be capable of accepting legitimate scrutiny. They must demand accountability from others while demonstrating accountability. Because independence without accountability can undermine public confidence, just as surely as interference can undermine institutional independence. As we reflect on 16 years of implementation, the deeper question is accountability for constitutional purpose. We should therefore be willing to ask ourselves difficult questions, and I want to add on to the questions that His Excellency the President added. Are our constitutional commissions and independent offices fulfilling the purposes for which they were created? Are they accessible to ordinary citizens? Are they sufficiently responsive? Are their recommendations and decisions translated into meaningful action? Do our institutions collaborate effectively when mandates intersect? Are there legal, financial, or administrative weaknesses that are preventing some institutions from fully performing their constitutional functions? Most importantly, can the ordinary Kenyan see the difference that the Constitution has made in his or her life? These are difficult questions, but a mature constitutional democracy must be willing to ask difficult questions of itself. Just like at the beginning, the provost gave us an example of the donkey dung and the difficulty of taking care of it and the shame of acknowledging that is there and dealing with it. And I think that is a reflection, or we can juxtapose the questions that we are asking today to that. Because constitutionalism must ultimately be felt. It must be felt by a citizen who seeks accountability for the misuse of public resources. It must be felt by a Kenyan who encounters maladministration. It must be felt by a person whose rights have been violated, and it must be felt by communities seeking fairness, equality, and justice. It must be felt in the integrity of a public service and in the responsible management of public resources. If the Constitution remains impressive on paper but does not translate into the lived experience of citizens, then our constitutional project remains incomplete. At 16, therefore, perhaps the most useful question is no longer simply whether the architecture created in 2010 was sound. The question is whether we are making the architecture work. The Constitution is only as strong as the institutions that implement it, and those institutions are only as strong as the trust they command from the people. The relationship between our institution must therefore never be reduced to competition over mandate or territory. There will naturally be points of tension within our constitutional democracy. Indeed, institutional checks and balances sometimes require tension. But constitutional tension should be productive and not destructive. Our institutions may disagree, they may scrutinize one another, they may challenge each other's decisions through constitutionally established processes, but they must always remain anchored in the recognition that they are components of the same constitutional republic. Independent, yes, but interdependent. Different mandates, but one constitutional mission. Different institution, but one people, and ultimately one constitution. As Attorney General, I approach this conversation conscious of the distinctive place of the Office of the Attorney General within our constitutional architecture. My role includes advising the government, defending the public interest, supporting the rule of law, and contributing to the continual strengthening of Kenya's legal and institutional framework. That responsibility demands that we protect the space necessary for constitutional institutions to perform their mandates, while also encouraging cooperation, accountability, and fidelity to the Constitution across government. It requires us to recognize a principle that is fundamental to the 2010 Constitution. No institution is above the Constitution, but no constitutional institution should be subjected to the improper control of another. This is the principle